With my map and my declaration of sentiments, my planning is underway for Women's Suffrage History Tour. Like Gloria Steinem, I'm going to go on the road. So, we're going to head out now, and our final destination today is Seneca Falls. Pulling out. Here we are pulling into Seneca Falls. Finally, we're here. We finally made it to Seneca Falls. 100 years later, here we are, Women's Rights National Historical Park.
Marietta Clintock over in nearby Waterloo, which is a National Park Service property.
At the side of the visitor center, the entire Declaration of Sentiments is engraved. And look at all the names of the signers. It's exciting to be here, right where the women's suffrage movement began. Here's Mary standing in front of the water in the background, Seneca Falls, on the Women's Museum. Votes for women. This town is steeped in women's suffrage. And we're going to go next to the Elizabeth Cady Stanton House, and I'd like to read a letter here at this spot. The older we grow, the more keenly we feel the humiliation of disenfranchisement, and the more vividly we realize its disadvantages in every department of life, and most of all in the labor market. We little dreamed when we began this contest, optimistic with the hope and buoyancy of youth, that half a century later, we would be compelled to leave the finish of the battle to another generation of women. But our hearts are filled with joy to know that they enter upon this task equipped with college education, with business experience, and with a fully admitted right to speak in public. Ever lovingly yours, Susan B. Anthony. And after this letter was written, it would only be a few days later that Elizabeth Cady Stanton would pass away in 1902. Here we are, down the block at the city of Auburn. Here's where we see the Harriet Tubman home where she lived as a free person. And in town, we see this beautiful statue. I'm so enamored of how she carried her gun.
Welcome to 27 North Main Street, Canandaigua, New York, Ontario County Courthouse. It's very important to the suffragist movement because it's where Susan B. Anthony was tried for voting in the 1872 presidential election in Rochester, New York. Because it was a federal crime, she was brought to what was acting as the federal court, Ontario County Courthouse, in 1873 for her trial. She was found guilty, was asked to pay $100 in fine. She refused to pay it in hopes she'd be thrown to jail and could take her case to the Supreme Court. They dismissed the case, however, so she was never able to take the case to the Supreme Court. But here we are on the site where Susan B. Anthony was tried for voting.
Now we're in Rochester at Susan B. Anthony Park with Frederick Douglass, and her home where failure is impossible. The Susan B. Anthony Women's Suffrage Museum. Here we are at the cemetery. I guess you would call it the end of the road. Here's Frederick Douglass and his wife. Here we are at Susan B. Anthony's final resting place. As a student at Vassar College, Inez Milholland challenged a rule that banned discussion of suffrage on campus by holding meetings in a cemetery. The beautiful Inez, born in Brooklyn in 1886, would be most famous for leading the parade down Washington, D.C., the 1913 Women's Suffrage Parade. After being on the road for women's suffrage, Inez would die November 25th, 1916, and these were the final words she spoke. The new Inez, Gloria Steinem. Born in 1934, Toledo, Ohio, her dad had their family on the road. She's an American feminist, journalist, social political activist. And I got to meet Gloria Steinem in 1981 with Bella Abzug. I hope that you've enjoyed our trip on the road.